welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer this month. Hi, it's almost May. Is this where I make that it's gonna be May jokes? We can only do it once a year, so I'm gonna use it now. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are doing well. It's hard to believe that we are now moving into May of 2023. This is going to be the month ahead reading. We're going to take a look at some of the major astrological themes for this next month. Do me a favor, if you're new to my channel, make sure you click the button below. Make sure you're subscribed so I'm alerted as to when you're subscribed, and you're going to be alerted to when you get those videos. Mercury's in retrograde, so you guys got to cut me some slack with this video. And I'm going to be touching on a lot of these transits throughout the month. So if you're new, I'm a Western astrologer. I work with tarot as well as what I see intuitively working with astrology and the Sabian Symbols. You can catch me here on Sundays. We have astro weather every week. There's a whole crew of people that like to hang out and take a look at the astrology for the week ahead. We've got horoscopes that are live. If you guys haven't already seen those, they're very long, but there's a lot of stuff going on this month. I hope you enjoy them, put a lot of work into them. That's going to be more for each and every one of the 12 signs. We'll be breaking down these transits throughout the month, so you can find me here on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. And if you guys are really feeling it this month, join me on Fridays. Generally, I have live readings, and we're going to be doing alternating between tarot and astrology. Generally, I always have them on Fridays, but we're going to be doing it, I think, this Thursday. So make sure you're watching that community tab. Your girl doesn't want to do readings on the eclipse. Yes, we've got an eclipse coming up, another one. So we're going to go through the whole month. So it's a good time to pull out your calendar, pull out your planners, grab a cup of tea or some coffee, get comfortable. And I'll be talking to you guys about some of the themes for the month ahead. Please also, if you guys like my content, make sure you interact with the channel. Sharing is caring. Give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment. Let me know if you're tuning in, if you're new, where you're watching from, or maybe you just want to say hello. And please, if you guys like my content, you guys are always more than welcome to join my memberships. I've got 3 different levels, and level 3 is going to come with a reading once a month during one of my live shows. Also, your donations are always appreciated. They go into being able to create more content, finding more time to bring you guys more. All right, thank you for the shameless plug. What's going on this month, right? And I feel like I've said this in the horoscopes, but it's like, you guys thought that, 2021 and 2022 is crazy. Believe it or not, 2023 is kind of like the buffer year before things really start to accelerate in 2024. But the chunk of what feels like the most intense change is actually April through about August, okay? So now we're going into May. We are going to be seeing another eclipse. So there will be an eclipse on the 5th. This is going to be the bookend eclipse to the solar eclipse in Aries that we had. Finally, the last lunar eclipse in Scorpio. No mas. We're not going to have any more for about 9 years. As a Scorpio myself, I am ready to bid farewell to these South Node eclipses. I'm ready for the South Node to go into Libra. As are many of the other fixed signs, so I don't think I'm the only one that's feeling it. Eclipses always come in pairs, so we see 2 of them roughly every 6 months. Sometimes we get lucky, we have an extra one. And obviously we know what Scorpio is, right? Ruled by Mars and Pluto. So it does deal with death, transition, transformation, crisis, purging, transforming, releasing, and letting go. If you guys want an in-depth video on that, there is a lunar eclipse in Scorpio video. Check it out. It's in my, I guess it's in the playlist. And I take you guys through the 12 signs. I also do touch on it in the horoscopes. But that's coming. Something else we got going on right at the beginning of the month is Pluto is going to station retrograde. So we are going to see that Pluto will be retrograde and will be retrograde really all the way until February of 2024. So some of the more shadowy things with Pluto in Aquarius might become more kind of behind the scenes. There's going to be like a veil that's going to kind of go over some of this stuff. We've been in the preview recently of just seeing Pluto spend a couple months in Aquarius. It's definitely brought up the darker side of politics and groups and the internet and AI and all of the things that we anticipated Pluto in Aquarius was going to bring. But it's also bringing this mass awakening. And does it use crisis as the catalyst? Yes, that's Pluto's game. We're going to see Pluto that's going to be retrograding back into Capricorn actually next month. So that'll be in June. That'll be a huge topic that I'm going to be talking about a lot, because we're going to see it return back to a cardinal sign. We're also seeing that Pluto is still in a pretty tight square with the nodes, and you're going to feel that building throughout this month as well. When we see that square, essentially, we're really feeling on a soul level that we must evolve, we must change, we must transform. But you know what? The fixed signs, they don't want to change. So we still feel a little bit of the gridlock between Pluto and Aquarius and the stellium of planets as we're moving into Taurus season. There's just like a cow party in the cosmos, and we're in a retrograde. So Mercury will go direct this month. Yay! We're going to see the end of the Mercury retrograde. Actually, as you guys are watching this on the end of April, like the 30th of April, 1st, 2nd of May, there's a Cazimi. So that's the one thing that's really setting up that's rather significant. I think it's going to be a turning point, a moment of realizing our values, what we really value, what we really need. Big changes going on with finances, just with this Mercury retrograde being in Taurus, because Taurus is a fixed earth sign that is about our food and our money and things going on with the banks and the financial systems. And by sign, it's all still in a square to Pluto and Aquarius. This retrograde in general is also very significant because it's in polarity to the incoming eclipse degree in Scorpio. So I've been trying to create content, trying to weave this together for you guys. So if you go back and if you watch the lunar eclipse video, if you watch the Mercury retrograde video, you're going to see me talk about how they're very intertwined, that we see the retrograde opposing this eclipse degree, helping everybody physically and financially get their shift in order before we see some of like the rocks and the rattles and the rolls with the lunar eclipse in Scorpio around the 5th. We're also going to be seeing that Jupiter is going to change signs. Jupiter is going to be moving into Taurus, really amplifying and creating changes in regards to our physical experience, what we physically possess or own, right? Jupiter magnifies things. So going into the sign of Taurus, we're going to see more learning opportunities when it comes to resources, money. I anticipate that we're going to hear a lot more about international exchange, new currencies coming online, and new laws, because believe it or not, Jupiter can deal with laws regarding where we can buy, what we can't buy, and it's all coming into a challenging square with Pluto and Aquarius. So we're going to see really the universe highlighting the North Node, Jupiter, all these placements in Taurus, what it means to get back down to bare bones, the bare necessities are, really focusing on what's natural, really focusing on what we can grow. But I think many of us are also really having to have some moments of reflection in what it is we feel like we need, right? Because as Jupiter goes into Taurus, we're going to see people go, I need more. I need more food. I need more love. I need more security. I need more land. And the squares to Pluto is just going to amplify power struggles, power plays, and where people are grabbing and snatching things up that they may not necessarily need, especially resources, as a means of control, right? This is just the astrology, all right? But I mean, the astrology, it reflects what's going on here, at least on our planet. Remember, this is all about the perspective of our relationship with the planets from Earth. So when we think of Pluto and Aquarius, you want to watch for some of these like super groups, right? These big tech companies. You want to watch for groups in general that are dictating, controlling, dominating. That square to Uranus and also the North Node and to Jupiter, basically making decisions about physicality, whether it's our food, our money, how we do our banking, our bodies, right? So there's this kind of clash between Venus, Taurus, what is natural, and Uranus, kind of Aquarius energy, which is what is otherworldly, supernatural, new, futuristic, where we're going. I've said for some time that this split that was coming in society really started back in like 2020, 2021, when we started seeing the Saturn-Uranus squares showing up. Because remember, Saturn was in Aquarius. It was kind of landlocked off and on for 2 years with Uranus and Taurus. We saw like all the FTX stuff. We saw the Robinhood stuff that was going on, all the meme stock stuff. Now we're seeing more results of some of that bending and now breaking recently in this last year with the FTX collapse and other banks that are having issues. So you don't need an astrologer to tell you that there is extreme stress going on in the financial world, okay? But the astrology is reflecting that. And to be honest with you, this is the month that everything goes kaboom. I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, but, right, even though I'm telling you this is for entertainment purposes, in astrology, especially when I'm giving my forecast or when I'm talking to a client one-on-one, I want to see something, show me in several different ways. As a rule of thumb, if I see 3 aspects, both in transits or progressions in the chart, I'm going to be like, hey, I think this thing is coming. All right. So I'm letting you guys know, hey, this thing is coming. And perhaps at some point during the month, I've had some people request making some comparisons to like the stock market chart or like the Bitcoin chart or whatever. And I may do that. But we will start to see not just the pressure, but we will start to see breakdown, because Pluto does create a breakdown. It's like that tower card, right? So everything kind of gets toppled. On the flip side, okay, for some people, and I've said it's going to be very unique configurations based off of your natal chart, it could also be an absolute amazing breakthrough moment where there are some really positive things that play out, where people come into more resources, they experience more abundance, they have some investment that they made that played out. But with Jupiter being about knowledge and global trends and anything in regards to the moral high ground, and Pluto, who kind of fights dirty, these two squaring off, we're going to see a lot of people start talking about integrity when it comes to politics, integrity when it comes to finance and banking. I think we're going to start to see more exposure of real bad, both financial and political corruption, high up in politics as well as within the banking system, and where the two are actually intertwined, and that there may be this incentive to also be manipulating, because what is foreign and unusual is generally either Aquarius or Uranus. And so we see Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus, and so there is this indication that there is some manipulation that is going on. Can it create some real extreme fear-based scenarios? Absolutely. So I want to tell you guys, be very careful about where you're getting your financial information. Be very careful about buying into some of this fear porn and manipulation that's going to come up. You're going to hear things about not having enough food. You're going to hear things about not having enough resources, that we're going to run out of power. We're going to hear more about this incentive or push for taxes on food or limitations or rationing of things. And when you hear this stuff, just take a breath, right? And it's important to ask yourself, is that the reality that you want to create? And I've been thinking about this for like the last couple days, doing a video that's going to be talking all about like fear and how to like better manage fear and work through fear. Because I think we need some more, on that. I did a video this last month on Pluto square the nodes. So if you guys haven't seen that, check that out. I talk about the reluctance to growing and evolving. And the truth is that just off the astrology, with the North Node and Jupiter moving into Taurus and this retrograde in Taurus, I don't really feel like we're supposed to be punishing ourselves for being here. Genuinely, that's my own personal opinion. I don't feel like the answer is less or more separation or more technology or more futuristic like fake meats and all kinds of weird substances that we're supposed to be consuming. Pluto in Aquarius is going to show us the darker side of humanity, and where if we're pushed to feeling like, we're all just a number and everybody just needs to get in line and just make the sacrifices because it's the best for the common good or the greater good of humanity or even our planet, we're giving our power away, right? The North Node in Jupiter and Taurus is saying there's enough land, there's enough resources, there's enough food. It's about being able to share. It's also about teaching people about financial wealth. It's about teaching people how to grow their own food. It's about teaching people to be mindful of where their food comes from. So we're kind of in a moment right now where humanity is at a crossroads, and we're going to feel this very significant economic crunch. We're going to feel also this crunch where we start to kind of realize that we have gotten here partially by giving our power away. We've gotten here partially by choosing convenience, right? So it's more convenient to go and pick up the fast food. than to actually go through the process of making our own food and knowing what's in it and where it's coming from, right? Because that's all work. Really, when you're paying for food, you're paying for a service, you're paying for convenience if you're going and getting it at a restaurant or if you're picking up food on the way home. So we're going to learn throughout some of these squares that there will be some critical turning points for all of us financially revolving around whether or not we feel like we have enough to thrive. So I think that crisis, Pluto squares, can create the catalyst for change. So you have to ask yourself if you're going to go deeper into the Pluto Aquarius wormhole, where you're really starting to believe that we're going to get stuck in the matrix, or you can lean more into the North Node in Taurus, and Jupiter going through there and the North Node going through there is saying there is a wealth of knowledge, wealth of information, and everybody is going to start reworking, especially this week with the retrograde, what it means to be abundant, what it means to also be human, getting back to basics. So you guys got to work really hard to kind of ground your energies out this entire month. So if you have to go outside and do some yoga, if you got to go and walk around in the grass, if you want to go hiking, if you want to cook, if you want to work with crystals, really focus on, grounding yourself out. That's really going to help you move away from some of the static in the world and start thinking about the small steps you can take towards actively building a more secure and also sustainable future for yourself. All right, so let's go through day by day. Let's take a look at some of these transits. Obviously, starting with May the 1st. And on the 1st is when we're having this Cazimi. So this is the halfway point through the Mercury retrograde. We're almost there. This is the turning point also where there is some awareness or some kind of epiphany. I told you guys last week that Sunday and Monday, okay, so today and tomorrow are excellent working days. We've got the moon that's been in Virgo. It's been trining all of this. So if you are watching this early in the morning and you're like, I was going to lounge around and be like a couch lizard all day, do something productive with your day. Look for all of these weird cosmic coincidences, these messages, dreams, number sequences, things that pop up, because the Sun Mercury is likely going to be relaying a message about how you can be of better service, whether it's to yourself, to other people, how to get better organized, because the moon is ruled by Mercury and it's picking up on the Sun Mercury Cazimi, which is generally a really positive omen, that we're learning something new about how to make a physical or a financial change. If you're listening to this, this is general, okay? So if you want to know where this is, take a look at the horoscopes or just look at where Taurus is in your natal chart. Now, this same day, later in the day, Pluto is going to go retrograde. I don't really feel like we're going to start to feel the effects of the Pluto retrograde probably until around about the time that we're coming into the eclipse, because Pluto is the co-ruler. So right when the moon is coming into Scorpio, it will square Pluto and conjunct the South Node within hours or like within the same day as the eclipse. So the eclipse is actually just going to kind of slap us around right when the moon goes into Scorpio. So you guys want to be mindful that it's not necessarily just going to be on the 5th. When we have an eclipse like we had this last month in April, we have 2 weeks in between. And sometimes eclipses, something hits a week later. Sometimes we have a solar eclipse and it plays out over 6 months. Sometimes we have a lunar eclipse and it's like everything's done the day of. I feel like this lunar eclipse, we're going to actually keep feeling until we get out of the Mercury retrograde. So it's probably going to go for another 2 weeks that energetically we're going to feel it. Anyway, watch for the cosmic messages, watch for the Pluto retrograde. The Pluto retrograde is important in a sense where there can be some really significant Pluto things that are coming up. So I think that we'll see that through the eclipse on the 5th. But you may not feel it as strongly unless you have a personal planet around 28 of Capricorn to, let's say, 2 degrees of Aquarius. Those, Scorpio risings, that's one of your ruling planets. So you guys might feel that a little bit more strongly. And Pluto is the underlord. Okay, so it is about things that are subterranean, that are hidden. There can be some shocks and surprises that are getting ready to come out with that retrograde. But the truth is that, it's going to return back to Capricorn next month. It's not going to come back until Aquarius until the new year. And in February, when Pluto comes back into Aquarius, Mars and Venus is going to move through there. So with retrogrades with outer planets like this, we don't really start to see like what's been going on behind the scenes. I'm not going to say until it's too late, but until the planet's direct. So whatever goes down for like the next 6 months or so, we're not really going to be aware of it until the beginning of next year. And when that happens, Mars and Venus will be the north and the south node rulers. And boy, it's just things are going to get pretty buck wild in 2024. If you guys have already started to look into the astrology next year, we're gonna see not only Pluto return back to Aquarius, but the North Node's gonna be in Aries. So we've had 2 years now of eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio. North Node in Taurus has been about more money, more resources, growth and everything in regards to abundance. And for some of us, it's like excess buying, excess eating, excess spending. And the North Node's going to move into Aries over the summertime, and it's going to put more of a focus on Aries. So Mars transits are significant. So I'm thinking about the beginning of next year when we see the Mars-Pluto conjunction. We'll talk more about that in the future. But basically, we're coming into a second eclipse. So we're going to have a second eclipse here that's going to happen the first, week of May. That's also ruled by Mars. Okay, so we had a solar eclipse in Aries. You guys, how are you guys doing with that? That was not fun. As a Scorpio who's kind of getting hit all over the place, I've got eclipses that are happening on my Pluto. I had an eclipse on my Moon. Yeah, it's been real. I think I have been thankfully I feel like I've been kind of coming out of some of the heavier transits, but it was like that solar eclipse in Aries just kicked the door in, and I don't have anything around the late degrees of the cardinal signs other than my Moon, but it shouldn't have affected me as much as it did. And so it kind of woke me up and made me realize, like, wow, like that eclipse square Pluto was like no joke. And we're going to keep seeing that reactivation over the next couple of months. So for you guys, if you're feeling the pressure, know that it's because we've been between eclipses. We're coming into the second eclipse that's going to be on the 5th, and it's going to be also in a Mars ruled sign. And Mars has been more or less debilitated in Cancer, right? So it's been moving through a sign that's ruled by the Moon. That is more moody and emotional and sensitive. And we're seeing domestic issues and problems with housing and issues with conflicts with relatives and, people talking about getting into domestic violence situations, unfortunately, and arguments with roommates and having, problems with being able to like make ends meet at home. So we're going to see another eclipse that's going to be hosted by Mars, which brings up more anger, frustration, yelling, angry tears. And thankfully Mars will be in a more harmonious aspect to Neptune, but this is about releasing and letting it all go. So I'll show you guys that eclipse chart in just a second. I want to take you first to the 4th. And on the 4th is when we see a Venus-Neptune square. Now this is important because Venus rules the North Node, and Venus is moving through the sign of Gemini, and we already saw Venus make one square to Saturn in this last month, where we saw some challenges in love and relationships. Squares are about conflict, right? So we've got Saturn, which is about boundaries and limitations in a sign that does not do well with boundaries and limitations. And we see Venus that's been moving through a sign that deals with communication. So there's been a lot of issues in relationships and finances revolving around all the things we're not talking about, that we're not saying. And not knowing how to find the words, or maybe there's been a lot of saying that we love someone or something or support someone, and then when push comes to shove, when we're going through something, maybe relatives or relationships have been having a difficult time finding the words. So we've been feeling that pinch, and now here comes Venus in a square with Neptune. Now, the pros, because there can be some pros, this can be more dreamy, inspiring. Hello, Mercury. More inspiring, but it can also be issues with transparency, dishonesty, lacking, all of the proof or the follow-up, right? Because Venus is about opening up to love, opening up to relationships, being able to receive. And in a mercurial sign, it wants to see you, tell somebody how you feel. It wants to have you make that phone call. It wants to have you send that text message. So there can be a sense of being like, wait, record scratch. They didn't call me back. I sent them the message. They read it. I didn't hear from them. There can be a sense of also like not knowing how to communicate, getting ghosted, There can be issues with, siblings or neighbors because it's in a sign that deals with that. So the squares can be about kind of being left hanging, right? Emotionally kind of left holding the bag. Not the best for purchasing things, especially cars, signing contracts, right? Because Venus is in a mercurial sign. So the third house can be about movement, contracts, siblings, online sales, signing things. And Neptune is creating some illusions and some distortions. Remember that there's a mutual reception going on. Venus is in a Mercury sign. Mercury is in a Venus sign. And while Mercury is retrograde in Taurus, just in itself, I would say, be very careful with spending right now. Okay, I've heard a lot, like all day today, I've been in sessions talking to people, and it's like I'm talking to a client who's like, yeah, I'm at the car lot. And I'm sitting there going like, oh my goodness. And hearing people talk about that they're making decisions and moving forward with buying things and doing stuff. And like, listen, it's my job just to give people advice and tell you what I see. Ultimately, if people decide to do these things, they can. But I think what we're going to find over the next month with the eclipse and the retrograde is that a lot of us are writing checks that we cannot cash. A lot of us are living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of us are just putting stuff on the credit card saying I'll deal with it later, and like shift is about to hit the fan. So with the Mercury retrograde in Taurus, I would already say be very careful with how you're spending your money. There is some benefit right now to trying to see how you can make things stretch, how you can be kind of better handling your shopping or your food habits, particularly in this sign. And really thinking everything through before you buy the new gadget, third house, buy the car, sign on to move, sign some kind of agreement, and there can be terms and things that are not entirely clear. I think this is going to be felt the strongest by Venus-related placements. So there can be some challenges here for Taurus and Libra, Sun, Moon, and Risings. Equally, Geminis, you got Venus on your ascendant, but it's squaring Neptune. Right? So there can definitely be some issues revolving around what it is that you need or you value versus, your responsibility out in the world. Check the horoscopes for a more detailed example. So then that leads me to the eclipse, which is the very next day. But one thing I said to you guys was as soon as the moon comes into Scorpio, which is actually going to be the PM hours on the 4th, the moon will conjunct the south node, representing a loss. It's going to trine Saturn in Pisces, which is also letting something go and bringing stability at the same time. So I could see a lot of emotional clearing, spiritual clearing, cord cutting, kind of separating, severing, happening on the night of the 4th. I don't even know what day that is. That should be during the week, though. I would be watching what's going on with the markets. I would be watching what's going on economically, because likely, with these Scorpio eclipses, we do hear about something kind of getting kicked up a little bit out in the financial world. And then we're going to wake up in the morning and we start to see that Mercury is coming out of an opposition with the moon. So I could see waking up on the 5th and everybody being like, did you hear the news about this thing, right? And Mercury is about banking in Taurus, and Venus is square Neptune. I have a feeling we're going to hear about some other kind of banking collapse or some other something that's coming through, and people are like, no way, like Venus square Neptune, no way that happened, and people are going to be shocked to find out sometime around this period, give or take a couple days on each side, that something ultimately is actually falling apart. The eclipse itself is going to be at 14 degrees. So if you have any placements in Scorpio, Sun, Moon, Rising, personal planets, let's say 13 to 15 degrees, it is on like Donkey Kong. And the moon is not entirely comfortable in Scorpio because it's moving through like a Pluto-related sign. And like I said, at the time of this eclipse, Mars is going to be debilitated in Cancer. So what's working in our favor is that if there was a time to go, I'm detoxing and purging, I'm getting rid of all the bad emotional habits, it's got to go, I need to just let this be, I need that release, this is a good eclipse to do these things. But I know that it's going to keep riding because the moon's going to keep going and it's going to come into a trine then with Mars, which will be around the late PM hours of the 5th, which can be more about conflict and anger and frustrations and emotions. And then it's going to come into a trine with Neptune. That's the last real aspect it's going to make. Something else I guess I should have mentioned, but I do talk about it in the videos, is that this is an eclipse that's in opposition to Uranus. Okay, so Uranus is like where the floor falls out. And Scorpio is about debt, taxes, loans, you know, like mortgages, things like of that nature. So a lot of people, I think, are going to be hearing more about possibly increased interest rates and the effects that that's going to have. More challenges in regards to paying off debt, you know, possibly that there's some new financial or tax related things that are getting ready to kind of come out in the immediate near future. So 4th, 5th, 6th, a lot of energy with this particular eclipse. All right, so let's take this actually to the morning. There we go. And then I will take you guys to the next transit. So the next big thing that I have on my list, and this is also happening in the background. I know I talked a little bit about Venus in a square, but while Venus is in a square, she is in a sextile to Jupiter. So there is a sense of like, okay, some of the changes that are happening in love and relationships are as a result of personal needs changing. I've been hearing a lot with clients throughout this last like week or so. A lot of people are just having this newfound awareness of like, I'm not in love with that person anymore, or I don't want to stay in this job anymore, or it's not part of my path, and I feel that there's something bigger coming, right? Jupiter and Aries. So while this square to Neptune is deceptive, the sextile to Jupiter is wonderful because it's saying through truly knowing yourself. And this is going to be so important post that solar eclipse in Aries. The North Node's going into Aries. Jupiter is now visible. That's something else, is Jupiter's been invisible and now it's going to be seen. So we're going to start to see the effects of Jupiter. Know thyself is kind of the phrase that pays for the next 2 years, is really not only know yourself, but be willing to stand up for yourself, be willing to know your rights, be willing to really walk the path of integrity, even though it will get challenging to do so. And then on the 5th, the 7th, kind of bouncing around here, sorry. Then on the 7th, there we go, of May, we're going to see Venus that's going to enter into the sign of Cancer. So that'll be a Venus change, which is important because, once again, Venus rules the North Node. So when Venus leaves Gemini and moves into Cancer, she picks up this energy of domestic harmony and bliss and redecorating and home and family and security and bringing more love, beauty to that. It is, I think, easier to have Venus in a water sign because there is more emotions connected to it, and it's in a sign that's associated with the moon. So now we're starting to see some harmonious aspects between Venus in Cancer and all of these placements in Taurus. For some of you guys, you know, love will become a verb for everybody, I think, because Cancer is a cardinal sign. So it's the act of nurturing, caring, you know, feeding other people, taking care of the pets, the animals, all of that stuff. For some of you guys, it might just be more about domestic bliss and enjoying your home space a little bit more, the security of your family or a home-cooked meal. The aspects that we're going to see are nicer than what we've seen with the Saturn and the Neptune square. We're going to find that throughout Venus's transit, you know, she's going to trine Saturn and she'll stabilize. She's going to trine the South Node and she's going to release and she's going to heal something. So I like that aspect. If you happen to be a Cancer Sun, Moon, or Rising, or a natal Venus in Cancer, you're getting ready to have your Venus return. It's just bringing in more love, more beauty, more abundance, more affection for you. Then we move to the 9th of May. And on the 9th, we're going to see the sun come into conjunction with Uranus. This is a day to watch. Okay, so mark this on your calendar for a number of reasons. First of all, Mercury through its retrograde has stopped short of coming into contact with Uranus. So that tells me Mercury started seeing something coming and he was like, hold up, wait a minute, I gotta go figure out what's going on. And likely it's going to be about the banks, banking, right? Resources, food, security, buildings, structures. And while he's retrograde, he's going and trying to work something out, get something organized, find the information before he brings it back. So he will eventually come into contact with Uranus later in the month. But the first planet now to hit Uranus is going to be the sun. So you guys remember that fun 18 degrees, right? Last summer when Mars North Node and Uranus all conjunct in Taurus. Somebody was asking about that webinar. There is a webinar on my website. If you guys are interested in that, check it out. It's an oldie but goodie. It still applies. I go through all of the aspects and how it'll play out between now and like 2024 and on. But I talk about how 18 degrees is like the service industry. It's about healthcare. It's about also our nervous systems. It's about our food. It's about literally cows and the meat industry. It's going to deal with digestion and health. Anyway, the list goes on. And I talk about how that conjunction, because Mars wants to cut and the North Node is the future, is we're going to start hearing about how they're going to be cutting jobs. We're going to start hearing about a loss of resources. We're going to start hearing about how there's an incentive to get rid of meat or dairy. We were going to hear about neurological issues, nervous system issues because of Uranus. And the service industry, and that there was going to start being big issues with cutting the service industry. Well, here we are, 6 months later, a little bit longer than that, we're seeing McDonald's popping up that's got self-serving, stations where there's nobody in there, right? Uranus is technology, food is Taurus. You guys are going to hear about mass job cuts, and it's already happening, but you're going to hear mass job cuts taking place in the tech world. Why? Because people are preparing for a recession. And not to be dramatic, but I think we're already in a recession. I think we're going to have a depression. So they're telling people, oh, we're going to be, being proactive, being cautious, but I think things are going to get worse. I also believe we're going to start seeing where there is an incentive to try to start disincentivizing people from wanting to buy meat or dairy products, which we're seeing. Look at New York City. Mayor's coming out talking about, things that they're trying to prevent there from being, pollution or other things to protect the environment, trying to sway people away from eating meat and dairy products. To each their own. If people want to eat a vegetarian or a vegan diet, have at it. That's your business. Personally, I feel like it's infringing on our freedom, right? Part of, living, at least here in the United States, is having the freedom to decide what do we think, what do we believe, what do we have to say, how do we want to spend our money, right? And so I think we're going to start seeing that there's problems here. I do think it may bring up more issues revolving around health problems, especially the sun represents the heart, okay? And the dispositor of the sun and Uranus is Venus, because it's ruled by Venus, and we see Venus in opposition to the moon. So I'm watching it like around the 9th where we're going to start hearing stuff about how, oh yeah, there's going to be shortages, or oh yeah, there's going to be issues with the banks. And like we might start to hear whispers of this, especially with the moon in Capricorn. And I think we're going to see a ripple effect of that North Node Mars Uranus conjunction that's going to be playing out a little bit. Sun Uranus is anything goes day, unless you happen to have any primary placements around, I would say 17 to 19 of the fixed signs, you might say, oh, I didn't really notice anything. But if you happen to be in a solar annual perfection year and the sun's coming into contact with Uranus, or if that happens to be on a personal planet, I would pay attention because it's going to kick up some similar stuff of whatever you were dealing with last summer. All right, so then that conjunction is going to pass. I want to move to the 12th, where we see Mercury in Taurus, sextile Saturn in Pisces. Finally, we see a nice aspect. Even though Mercury is retrograde, it's getting stabilized with Saturn. Quite literally, I know that Pisces deals with intuition and spirituality or religion, foreign lands, people who are lost. But I think that Saturn is structures, just to be very literal. Saturn is structures. and Neptune or Pisces is what dissolves. So I think that we're seeing things dissolve that are not, they don't have a solid foundation. And it can be literal buildings. It can be government structures. It can be government narratives. It can be hospitals and treatment centers. So there's no coincidence that with this sextile to Mercury in retrograde that we're going to see certain narratives revolving around immigration, certain narratives revolving around also the banks, and having control over situations and that everything is fine may actually start to crumble. Notice that Saturn hits a 6, Mercury hits a 6. That is also, once again, a Virgo degree. Okay, so not to like beat a dead horse here, but it's kind of like acknowledging the elephant in the room, you know, like there's a lot of things that we have been told about the economic situation and also about health mandates that frankly were not true. And this is where I start to think that they're realizing that if some of this information starts to come out, it could have some really, really, really significant repercussions financially, right? So I think we're going to start to kind of hear more about that. I'm also watching, you know, call me a conspiracy theorist, but I have some concerns for some of the incentives that are going on, whether you say it's through Bill Gates or through, you know, other companies, talking about injecting our mRNA into animals. And, you know, we don't really even know a lot about how it's going to affect humans. We just know what we've seen over these last few years. But I look at the sixes setting up and wondering, like, is that the future? Are they going to be doing this? Are they going to tell people that it's in the food? You know, do you know where your food is coming from? On my list of to-do, literally during this retrograde is me, like I've created a whole list of like all the farmers markets that I want to be going to over the next like 2 months and getting an idea of what farmers markets I want to go to, or if I want to, you know, decide that I want to be ordering and bringing something in from, you know, a company that is not going to be doing that with their food, and coming up with a plan to be like, okay, do I want to get, you know, like a seed vault? Do I want to start thinking about planting a garden? I'm kind of like in a limbo space right now where, you know, my husband and I, we moved, but we're trying to figure out where we're going next. So for me, this year is all kind of getting everything in order and teaching myself these things before we make that jump, hopefully within the next year. So during a retrograde, it's a good time to reevaluate, organize, you know, go back, review things. So if you've been wanting to do that with your finances, if you've been wanting to clean out your cupboard, if you want to kind of learn more about food preservation, if you're wanting to, you know, just get rid of things, let things go, sell things, you know, or like tighten up your budget. Like this is a good day to do that because of the sextile that you're going to be seeing between these two and kind of get something in a much more functional, healthy working order. At the same time, we're also going to see Mercury that's going to be sextiling Venus. So there's some conversation between home and family, resources, and possibly intuition and like planning that's all lining up. And we've seen Venus that's also been trining the South Node, which can be about, you know, planning in a productive way in worst case scenario. And Venus is in a trine to Saturn. So I love the 12th of the month for just sitting down and just being really practical and being like, what steps can we take? What do we need to change? And I'm assuming it's going to come on the heels of some of the stuff that's going to happen with this eclipse. On the 13th of the month, Venus in Cancer will officially trine Saturn. So you'll start feeling it on the 12th, but yes, it's going to happen on the 13th. And we're going to start picking up, we're going to start picking up also the moon in Cancer. Excuse me, the moon in Pisces. Hello. So moon Saturn, not the easiest aspect, you know, get quiet, meditate, reflect, take time alone. But the trine to Venus and also the trine to the South Node is wonderful. This can be a time where we're deeply emotionally committed to someone or something. Saturn trine Venus, we can see romantic relationships move forward, commitments can be made, talking about getting married, talking about buying property, real estate. There can be a sense also of, you know, committing to a deep spiritual practice because we have that Saturn moon conjunction in the 12th. So that can be good both for finances and relationships and really ensuring that we have the support we need, both emotionally, but also it can be financially, or that we're willing to do that we're willing to make sacrifices and give to other people with the Saturn Moon conjunction in the 12th house. Then we're going to see on the 14th of the month, Mercury goes direct. So Mercury retrograde is over. And it looks like that's going to be happening right around 5 degrees of Taurus. So the retrograde will be done. 15th, 14th. It's going to be late in the evening on the 14th, early in the morning on the 15th. So when you wake up in the morning on the 15th, the retrograde is over. If you've been waiting for signing a contract, buying something, moving, agreeing to something, investing, moving money around, on one hand, I feel inclined to tell you guys, like, there is still going to be the post shadow, but if you are waiting specifically until the direct moment, you can really start moving forward around the 15th of May. The energy significantly changes the second half of the month. And if you guys already saw my horoscopes, you heard me talk about how we have some rather unusual astrology. We're going to see that, Mars and Jupiter are both moving to the late degrees of the cardinal signs. So they're going to get very active. We are also going to see that then Jupiter will hit 0, then Mars will hit 0, and we're going to have a grand fixed cross. So for those of you guys who have planets, the late degrees of the cardinal signs, especially Aries, Sun, Moon, or risings, Jupiter's going to swing through there. And by the way, Jupiter's going to be reactivating the eclipse. So the fact that Jupiter is hitting 29 degrees again, and now, as of the day that you guys are watching this, Jupiter is now visible in the skies. So it means like we're going to start seeing the blessings of Jupiter. What does Jupiter bring in Aries? He brings more self-awareness, more courage. He may bring also more self-awareness, self-betterment. I think that this is going to be about motivation, honestly. And when Jupiter hits 29, not only is it that, kind of do or die aneretic degree, which feels like it's the turning point before one thing ends and something new begins, it's also going to be, picking up that energy of the conjunction to the North Node, expanding our future destiny, right? Then we're going to see Jupiter square Pluto. It's going to start coming into a square with Mars. You'll see it in just a second, but I just want to let everybody know, like, very unusual astrology, basically. When planets square the nodes in evolutionary astrology, we have to integrate the theme of that node. So if you guys have heard me talk about Pluto in Aquarius, which is the only way through this, what feels like a crisis, is actually an awakening with Pluto in Aquarius of the masses. And that's how we collectively move forward and we make a change, as if everybody wakes up. However, we're not just going to have Pluto square the nodes, which can bring war, conflict, death, destruction, violence. Sure, it can bring those things. But ultimately, Pluto wants to bring all of these things as a catalyst for change and transformation. So it will kind of disrupt groups and networks and boards and mass numbers of things that aren't working. Okay, it can also be the internet. All right, so then on the flip side, we're watching Mars come into Leo the second half of the month. And that's also a really pivotal change because we've got the South Node ruler that's changing signs. So similar to when I said, hey, we got Venus going into Cancer, it's sextiling the North Node. We're focusing on getting stable. It's trining Saturn. We're really working on our spiritual beliefs. Mars going into Leo, where it's very boastful and it's loud and it's proud and it's a solar energy, is immediately going to square the nodes. So, and I said this in my horoscope, so those of you guys who already saw it, I apologize, but like, listen, this is like war energy. I mean, this is like, weapons. I mean, Mars can be about conflict, and Mars in Leo is about people getting set off and egos getting inflamed and, people doing some dangerous things with Mars in opposition to Pluto. There's so many connections, and I'm not going to get political. If you guys want to follow my Instagram, because I do, post news things and then look at charts. And I will just say that something I'm looking at is the fact that, Ukraine's, I guess, prime minister or leader, Zelensky, He's got placements in all of these degrees. He does. So if you've looked at his chart, I'm not going to pull it up, but he's going to have a Mars return in Leo that is going to have a Jupiter square and a Pluto opposition. So between looking at that and, you know, the pressure ramping up in his chart into what can potentially be some deadly situations, and then also looking at, you know, Putin's chart and looking at some things that are going on there, I think there's also going to be some increased tensions. But it doesn't have to just be Ukraine and Russia. And I don't want to be somebody else who's a part of the propaganda machine who's trying to distract you. I'm letting you know that you're going to hear about that stuff. What you guys should be paying attention and listening to is what's going on with the banking system, right? Because a lot of the stuff that's going to come up is going to distract you. Especially when Mars goes into Leo, it's going to be drama involving celebrities. That'll be the theme for the next several months, with Mars in opposition to Pluto, with Mars square Uranus, with a Venus retrograde in Leo. You're going to hear so much drama about celebrities that when these things start coming up, you have to ask yourself, why is that happening right now? What is the purpose for trying to get everybody riled up about potentially J-Lo and Ben Affleck separating? Or whatever it ends up being, what are they distracting us from? I also feel like we're going to hear a lot more with Mars, because Mars is about weapons and it's going into a sign that's associated with youth or younger people and children. I happen to live in Texas, just watching the news. You know, there's this push for a bill that they're trying to push to incentivize encouraging teachers in the state of Texas to be armed, and that they're potentially suggesting that they would get an increase of pay of up to $25,000 per year, which if you're a teacher, if you know teachers, that's probably upwards of close to what most, I would say, elementary school teachers are making. I don't know, but it's a substantial amount of money. That's a large fraction of what their annual salary is, I would assume. So in an incentive to better protect children is what they're saying. Regardless of where you stand on this is going to be a hot topic. We're going to hear a lot more about guns in America, whether or not they're good, whether or not we need to be instructing people to defend themselves. That's very Mars going into an opposition with Pluto, and it's going to be also very political. Can this materialize with some of the oppositions in the squares is another unfortunate event? Yeah, but you don't need an astrologer to tell you that tensions are kind of high all over the world, that somewhere, if you're making these broad suggestions or predictions, something's going to hit, right? So I don't want to throw darts at a board, but I'm going to tell you this. The last 10 days of the month are they're dangerous. And if you happen to be out and about in crowds, just be aware of your surroundings. If you happen to have any personal planets that are around 29 degrees of the cardinal signs, or more specifically 0 degrees of the fixed signs, pay attention to what's going on, because we're going to have an opposition to Pluto and a square from Jupiter. More on that, go listen to your horoscope. I'll tell you where it's playing out. But tempers will flare. We're going to see with Mars in Cancer coming into this trine with Neptune, that there is a sense of letting go or like loss or releasing something. So I'm also watching right around the 15th of the month, because we'll be picking up with the moon and Neptune trine Mars. So something around emotional purge, letting go, releasing. There can also be sadness and sorrow that comes with these degrees, unfortunately. Then we're going to see on the 16th, that is when Jupiter enters Taurus. And so to be very specific here, this is what I'm talking about, is right when Jupiter hits 0 degrees, 0 degrees, 0 degrees, and then just a couple days later, Mars will oppose Pluto. So it's really going to be quite strong, the 16th through the end of the month. But I think we're going to pick up more when the moon goes through Taurus. But for right now, looking at, Jupiter going into Taurus, Jupiter is going to want to bring more of things. It's a magnifying glass. So the fact that it's coming into conjunction with the North Node, I feel like we're going to start to hear more about, who has all of this land and who's buying land and who's buying it up. And is it, foreign countries coming in, and we have foreigners buying land in other places, right? Because Jupiter can be foreign. The ruler is Venus, and Venus is going through Cancer. So I think you're going to hear about people talking about, well, we need more land, or we need to buy more land, we need to expand our home, or we need to relocate. I think you're going to hear a lot of people also talking about changes going on in the financial systems. And Jupiter conjunct the North Node generally is an abundant placement. So even though a lot of this stuff sounds kind of like doom and gloom, look at where Taurus is in your chart. Know that Jupiter and the North Node are going to be kind of kissing for the better part of this month. And it's going to bring you an opportunity for more abundance. But it's going to come on the heels of what's going to feel like a crisis. So where do I think this is going to pick up? I think this is probably going to pick up more when the moon goes into Taurus, and the moon's obviously comfortable in Taurus, but when the moon comes into Taurus, conjuncts Jupiter and the North Node, it will square Pluto. So the time where we're going to see the most intensity actually is going to be like the 17th on. So yeah, more or less the second half of the month. North Node, Moon, Jupiter, really emotionally getting in touch with the earth, getting in touch with our security. When things get stressful, what do we do, right? Is it going to be panic spending and buying? Because with the squares to Pluto, I think a lot of people are going to do that. In the stock market, I think we're going to see similar situations where people are hoarding materials. And I think maybe there's an incentive to do that. Call me crazy. I also feel like the squares to Pluto are bringing up where when a crisis is created, presents the opportunity for politicians or, government figures or, leaders to step forward and go, we have a solution for you, right? Create the problem and then act like the savior. And the theme here is to watch for that situation. And it doesn't have to be just like that. It could be in your own life. It could be the thing that looks really good and stable and secure, but it comes at a cost. The job that you sell your soul for, the wealthy spouse that doesn't treat you very well, but you're going to be taken care of, that kind of stuff. Everything's going to come with a cost. And so for me, it's a lot of like, are you going to take the poison apple? It might be satisfying right now. It might give you what you need in this moment. And I think it's driving people to some situations where there is a desperate need for food or there is a desperate need for more resources. And people then get scared that they go, okay, whatever, just, help me, right? And so we want to try to avoid those situations. This whole retrograde is about what changes we can make to simplify our lives and our finances. So in the off chance that something inevitably happens, are we in a position where, we've got a little bit of extra food, we've got a little bit of spare cash, we've got some things we've already parted with, we've already kind of decluttered and simplified our life. I hope you're doing that because that's what's going to make things easier. And I feel like just coming from somebody who had the privilege of, knowing my grandparents and getting a chance to talk to them and hearing about what life was really like in, the 40s and how difficult it was to not be able to afford food unless it was canned and rationing things in a day where, men actually took pride in going and serving and protecting their country. It's so weird to have those relationships with my grandparents who tell me these stories and then see how things are now. Because the truth is that just, the world changes, right? We evolve, but we've also become very comfortable. We've become very comfortable because we have learned that we can sacrifice our life and all of our free time to be able to afford to buy things and to consume and to have convenience. And what this month is going to teach us, especially the end of this month, is that hard times make strong men or women, or however you identify in this climate. Sorry, but it's going to show a lot of us that there's a lot of room for growth. So the North Node conjunct Jupiter is abundant, but not necessarily in a financial state. For some, sure, but the squares to Mars, the squares to Pluto, growing pains, right? So there's going to be growing pains this month. Watch for those growing pains to start on the 17th, okay? And keep in mind that then as the moon continues to keep coming through Taurus, it's going to touch on the North Node. So just be focusing on the 17th, grounding your energy out. Make sure you're eating healthy food, right? If you got to water the plants, take a walk out in nature, do all of those things. The moon then will sit in conjunction with Mercury, which will be going direct just a day or two prior. So now we're kind of finalizing a lot of our Mercury retrograde stuff and kind of getting things set up and in order. And then boom, early the next day on the 18th, the moon comes into contact with Uranus. It's the last planet it's going to hit before we have the new moon, which will be in Taurus, which is going to rock, rattle, and roll. We also have the sun that is sextiling Neptune. So we're still staying in connection with our higher self, meditating, reflecting, asking for guidance, asking, you know, our pastors, our preachers, our priests, our gurus, our teachers, our spirit team, whatever, like what is the way forward, right? And really the truth is that Saturn, I think in Pisces, is teaching a lot of us that we need to have faith. Jupiter in Taurus is teaching us that we need to actively be working on our faith, be building our faith, and also focusing on being able to build solid foundations with others. Because this is a lot of divisive energy with the squares to Pluto. Like when shit hits the fan, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be blaming separate sides and this, that, and the other. And it's designed that way. The Moon-Uranus connection is destabilizing, okay? We're also going to see within this month that Uranus is now coming into brand new unfamiliar territory. If you guys remember, Uranus got to about 18 degrees, 19, and then it retrograded. So now we're going to see Uranus move from 19 to about 22, 23 degrees in the coming weeks and months ahead. So Uranus is hitting 19, which is a relationship degree. It's a Libra degree. It's about balance and equality and laws and partnerships. And Uranus hitting that obviously is like, I think it's going to start to show a lot of people where when the going gets tough, like, are you with the right person? Do you have the right spouse? Do you have the right business partner? Do you have the right accountant, right? Do you have the right people on your side? And I think it's really going to show a lot of us where through pressure in situations with finances where we start to kind of really look around and go, wow, like it's going to help us reevaluate whether or not we are in relationships with the right people. Could some of these financial challenges get to a breaking point where it does create some challenges in relationships? Yes. Do I think it has to happen the moment that this transit happens? No. That's not really how astrology works. The moon will trigger things. So can there be some shocks and surprises with relationships and finances? Yeah, especially if there is some financial crisis and somebody goes, okay, honey, well, remember that like emergency fund that we had? You know, like we need to transfer some funds. And then you find out that somebody's been, you know, spending some money or the money's not there or that they loaned it or that it's gone or, you know, like stuff like that can happen. And then we come into the new moon. So we'll have that new moon in Taurus. That's going to be happening at 28 degrees. So it's going to be conjunct Algol. That's fun. And this is a new moon in Taurus ruled by Venus. Venus is in Cancer, you know, it is in decent place, still slightly trying to Saturn, sextile to all this Taurus energy. So I'm happy with that. I'm not wild about Mars at 29 degrees. That feels like nails on a chalkboard to me, personally. It feels a little intense. It feels super freaking moody. And we're starting to pick up the energy of Jupiter square Mars. So remember, Mars rules the South Node, right? War, what is taboo, what's hidden. It's about, you know, pain and abuse and mistrust. So as Mars is coming into a square with Jupiter, we feel an inflammation of some of these like domestic or emotional kind of agitations. This new moon is in trine to Pluto, so I don't want to talk too badly about it. It's not horrible. The only thing that's kind of off-putting is that it is conjunct Algol, which is about losing our head, right? And it can be through intoxication. It can be mental issues, neurological issues. It has connections to Medusa, if you guys are familiar with that archetype in mythology. It's trine Pluto. It's an out of element trine, but it's a trine, which is very powerful. And it's also in a sextile to Neptune, and like we don't have a negatively aspected Venus. So outside of the specific fixed star, it's not a bad new moon. It's a good time to be like, okay, so all of that stuff happened. Now how do we restructure? What's challenging is that this is going to set up a whole 28-day cycle until we get to the next new moon, and what's going to be embedded in this is Mars opposed Pluto square Jupiter. So we're actively working through some of these squares all month long. If you happen to be a Mars ruled chart, so if you're a Aries or a Scorpio rising, you're going to feel this, especially Scorpio risings, because you're going to feel the Mars in opposition to Pluto. Those are both your chart rulers. Equally, Taurus, Sun, Moon, and Rising, especially at early degrees or Sag rising, pay attention. You're going to feel this because you're going to be the focal point of this T-square. And then Mars is coming into... There we go. Mars is going to come into Leo. And that'll be on the 20th of the month. So I know we talked about the moon conjunction and the retrograde and coming into the new moon and like, yeah, Jupiter square Pluto, you're going to see some stuff. But in my opinion, the real hot zone is going to be the 20th through the end of May. Okay, so you may kind of start feeling that buildup, but watch what happens when we see just after the new moon, Mars makes an opposition to Pluto. We then see the sun hit 29, so it represents like that crisis, that turning point. By the way, that new moon that we're going to have is the same degree as or within a degree of a lunar eclipse that we had. So go back to November of 2021. I think it's the 19th. That's right when the stock market started kind of tanking and having some issues. So we may see something similar where there's another downturn. Once again, I look at this from several different perspectives, so I'm not basing it off of a new moon. It's very typical when we see the moon coming into the dark moon phase, everybody kind of panics and, tries to maybe kind of like get out because things are breaking down. That's how it works with the new moon. But the Mars in opposition and the square to Jupiter is basically all in financial signs. Taurus is the banks. Leo is our own personal kind of like what we need for fun, what we need for our kids, taking chances, risking things. Those of you guys who are really into like gambling, please be careful because there can be like massive lotteries. There can be really big sweepstakes and buy this and get in on this raffle. And if you're somebody who's really into like sports betting and stuff, like a lot of people could really lose their shorts. But also like big risk, big reward for some. So it's going to depend on your unique configurations. In my opinion, the ones who I think are probably going to do the best throughout this transit, just because it's going to hit in financial houses, although it can be different depending on your chart, is going to be Aries and Libra rising, because Aries is going to have Jupiter in the second house of possessions. Libra rising is going to have Jupiter in the 8th house of other people's resources. Those are the placements or the signs that are likely to see the most growth. Now, when Jupiter goes into Taurus, it's going to stay there all year. It's going to go all the way to about 15 degrees and then retrograde back. So if you have any placements, 0 to 15 degrees of Taurus, sun, moon, rising, it's going to bring more optimism, expansion, abundance your way. Taurus risings, just watch your waistline. You can definitely pack on the pounds. There can be a sense of really wanting more. And through a Jupiter transit, yeah, we can want more sweets. We can want more money. We can want to collect things. But Jupiter ultimately wants travel. It wants philosophy. It wants to learn something. So by feeding Jupiter with knowledge and going, okay, I'm going to go on a trip. I'm going to take the course. I'm going to buy the book. I'm going to work with, the mentor or the guru. We can appease Jupiter and it doesn't have to play out in a sense of weight. But for Taurus placements, especially Taurus ascendants, and I would also say Taurus suns, these are the ones that you guys really want to watch. And so we're going to have this configuration on the 20th that's going to set up. But I don't really know if we're going to feel it really, really until we start to see the moon get into Leo. Then it's going to really start kind of picking up. The same day, we're going to see the sun go into Gemini. So on the 21st, happy birthday to obviously all of my May and Tauruses and Geminis. But this is when the sun goes into Gemini. And like, once again, I'm not mad at it. We've got a sun trine Pluto. So, this is going to be okay, we talk about, we change, we transform, we get together. I think the sun in Gemini season is going to kick off with a bang. The fact that it's going to also have the moon in Gemini, the fact that it's trining Pluto is about power, with words, with connection, communication, sharing of ideas, bringing people together collectively. Yes, you are going to see the moon square Neptune and Saturn, and eventually the sun will square Saturn. But, you know, we'll see that throughout this year as planets go through the cardinal signs. Look for the lemonade, right? Like, yeah, you're going to see with Saturn squares, there's going to be delays, but Saturn doesn't deny always, unless it's not in alignment for you. Yes, watch out for those Neptune squares, because there can be issues with deception and things that are being falsified or manipulated in some way or edited. But we're going to really lean into the trines to Pluto, and we're really going to also lean into some of the sextiles with Mars, because people are going to start being like, I'm speaking up, I'm saying something, I'm doing this. Great for creatives, great for people who write, great for people who have blogs or websites, or you want to go and create channels and other things. I think it's some really very potent energy, 0, 0, 0, all at the same time. So even in spite of the Mars opposed Pluto, I think this is where creativity kind of steps in, and maybe even youth steps in and is kind of like, this is not going to fly. So you're going to see more like Greta Thunberg, you know, type people out in the world that are challenging, you know, politicians and, you know, talking about corruption and banking. And like, we may see some really interesting people emerge that have something to say, because there's going to be a lot of activity in Leo all summer long with some of the retrograde. But yeah, Mars opposed Pluto is it's a little dangerous with the squares to Jupiter and the nodes. And I guess the truth is really ask yourself, you know, do I need to stop and take a breath? Because just with Mars and Leo, there's a tendency to pop off because it is a solar sign. But with Mars square the nodes, it's going to push some people to fight, right? Actively. It's in a fire sign, so it's not necessarily going to think it's going to react. It just heats up. And with Pluto square the nodes, there's also going to be this challenge between, you know, like older generations, because Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, and younger generations, you know, tech versus, you know, people who are going to be more focused on, you know, being more natural or creative or bohemian. And we're going to start to see the split in society even more. The bedrock of this fixed square is the focus of energy in Taurus. Jupiter in Taurus, the knowledge of knowing when to slow down, get in the body, right? Knowing when to ground yourself out and make slow, intelligent, and decisions that are really reflecting on your own personal values and integrity. Mercury that just stationed in the second house or in Taurus, knowing when to slow down and communicate better and clearly, and knowing where all of your resources are. Now we're going to start to see that we need more Taurus-related figures in the world, okay? We need farmers, we need conservationists, we need people who are going to be artists, we need cooks, we need people who can teach us, you know, how to be able to work with the earth. And I love that Venus is in Cancer at this time. So it's like, man, if you're a butcher, if you know a little bit about sewing and home design, if you know a little bit about creating clothes, if you know how to preserve food or canned food, if you want to start a cooking blog, I mean, like, I know I sound crazy and that I'm just kind of going off on a bender here, but like, the people who are going to be the most successful and the most abundant through this next year or two are the people who are the most resourceful, the people who know how to fix things themselves, build things themselves, create things from scratch, bake bread, and really get back down to basics. So if you're somebody who knows a little bit about this, there may be this door that opens where you have an opportunity to teach and receive abundance. If you're interested in some of these things, you might just notice that it's becoming more popular, but don't get stuck into the trappings of all of the financial stuff and be feeling like you have to spend more money, and if you're buying something that's super expensive, it's better. I think that there is a way for some people to start learning from home or within the comfort of their home. I think there's also ways for people to start being able to be more focused on homeschooling, I'm always cautious to like talk about this topic because like I don't have children. A lot of my clients do, a lot of my friends do. I'm so glad to hear more about this out in the world right now with people who are talking about homeschooling their children and realizing just that perhaps maybe the public school system is a little lost or a little broken. We've got teachers that are overworked and underpaid. We've got kids that, quite frankly, are not very respectful. And I think that there is also just this indoctrination that's going on that's just not really encouraging people or I should say children, to think for themselves. And so when this started turning, I don't know. I can't tell you. It's making me question, as a 34-year-old, my education and what I learned. But I also know that I have chosen a very different path than a lot of people since, going to school, that I have spent the better part of the last 10, 15 years kind of reprogramming the way that I think and like trying to live life differently. And so far, it's kind of working in my favor. So that's why I'm working with you guys and sharing some of my knowledge with you. But if you're questioning whether or not you have the capabilities of educating your children, a lot of people work full time. They don't really feel like financially they could swing private school. They don't know if they have the chops or the time to be able to educate their children. Start looking at the situation because some of these conflicts are coming up for solutions. I do think that we're going to see like more pod-based homeschooling. I do think that we're going to see more education at home that is not just about, can you do your division? Can you do this and name the 50 states? Although those things are important. It's like, do you know how to balance a checkbook? Like, do you know what a checkbook is? Do you know how to come up with a budget? How do you do your taxes? How do you appropriately, cook a meal and preserve food? How do you grow a garden, right? But also, where do you come from? What is your lineage? What is your background? Where do you come from and where does your ancestors come from? What do you know about this country? And really learning more about your roots. Right? That's what the North Node in Taurus is still going to be teaching us. That's what we're going to see as planets go through Cancer, is are we focusing on a home and a family base and cultivating and creating the future generations that we want? Because I think we're getting lost right now, both from financial stress and obviously a lot of that financial stress leads also to, people having domestic issues and single parents and not having enough money to, be able to always put food on the table. So community, right? Community education, community, and bringing people together and realizing that family is not necessarily just limited to our blood relatives. It could be our neighbors, it could be our friends. And I think a lot of people are going to start thinking a lot more about investing into education in general with Jupiter and Taurus. And whether you want to learn about food or you just want to be just more knowledgeable as a person, knowledge is power. Okay, Pluto in Aquarius there is going to be a war on what information you have. One of the best investments you can make, and it's something I've been doing, I make a point probably once a month or so, I'm buying books. Print and books are changing. I'm not a super religious person by any means, but I know that there are Bibles that are very different now that are out there than Bibles that maybe you've had for decades. There are books where things are being removed or things are being tweaked or changed. There's books that are hitting ban lists and all kinds of other things. And I feel like we're becoming so heavily reliant on the internet and so heavily reliant now on AI and other things that we're asking questions to programs that are spitting out answers, but where are those answers coming from? Obviously search, SEO and all that stuff, and you're going to find that it's going to give you the thing that's probably the most like probable. But who's determining or deciding whether or not that's truth? And if we're going in a direction with society where we ask a question to a computer or a robot and we get a regurgitated answer, and we're no longer buying newspapers, we no longer have stuff that's hard copy or books, we have no reference point. Start collecting books. Collect books on things that interest you. Collect books on anatomy. Collect books on gardening. Collect books on cooking. Natural health remedies, right? Things that are going to be needed in the future where we're being told, no, you can't buy a part for a car. I'm sorry, you just have to buy a whole new car, right? So if you know a little bit about mechanics and if you know how to fix things and if you have a manual, you'll be able to manage better than most people. Same thing with education, same thing with history. So I think that having physical, tangible knowledge and references with Jupiter and Taurus is going to be valuable. having also life skills and knowing how to be able to do some of these things. So basically, yeah, from the 20th, 21st of the month on, things continue to get increasingly more intense. We're going to see that on the 22nd, the sun will start coming into a sextile, exactly more so 21st and 22nd with Mars, making us feel active, wanting to share, wanting to get out there. It's decent energy, actually. I mean, outside of the oppositions and the squares, you know, the sun and Mars in a sextile is helping us kind of get going and communicating and kind of moving about a little bit more freely. Then on the 23rd, oops, there we go. Then on the 23rd, that is when we're going to see Mars come into a square with Jupiter and Taurus. There we go. Okay. So Mars square Jupiter. Jupiter makes things bigger, right? Remember, Venus is the ruler of, or the dispositor of Jupiter. So we've got the moon conjunction. I'm watching the housing market, personally. That's what I'm looking for. I'm wondering if that's where this is going to play out. I'm wondering if there's going to be some like false flag situation, or there's going to be some kind of heated exchange, because Mars can be about military. And we're hearing like, oh, well, we have to do something because we have to defend our country type of vibe. As I film this, it's the 29th. I'm hearing about military operations and exercises that apparently the United States is participating in. And I'm wondering like, okay, what's going on with like this whole China and Taiwan thing? On a personal note, I keep thinking about this and I'm like, like thinking about the BRICS nations and the fact that they're all coming together, and that, you know, the Chinese doing business with their currency, and like now it's starting to get where it's being traded more so within the other BRICS nations and getting ready to surpass the dollar. Obviously, the dollar is going to lose power, right? So what's really going on? Are we shifting away from this narrative that, you know, it's all about Ukraine and Russia? And are we going to start, you know, now feeling like we're targeting China because the US is getting threatened because of their lack of financial flex? Maybe. I'm just speculating. You know, and I've seen people say things like, well, I don't want to listen about politics. You don't have to watch my channel. I'm sorry. That's part of why I love astrology, is that the astrology is really going to show you what's going on. And the truth is with Mars in opposition to Pluto, there's going to be some threatening situations and some people who are going to be going toe-to-toe over what they can possess, right, or control. Could it be banking? Sure, but it could be natural resources. It could be land that could be very valuable because of natural resources. So I think of like gas and minerals and physical, tangible things. I know that the first couple degrees of Mars does deal with a virus. I don't like saying that, but I know that it does. The Sabian symbol is connected to that. I'm positive. And so I'm thinking about like this Mars coming into opposition with Pluto, squaring Jupiter. You know, we've heard stuff coming out in the news the last couple days about, you know, the World Health Organization saying something about like there's fear of, you know, labs being invaded. I don't know where. I want to say Sudan, but I don't want to say that because I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. But and that apparently there were vials of like polio. So I'm looking at this going like, oh, okay, is there going to be this, you know, other fear tactic that's going to come up this week with a new potential virus, or, oh, this thing's going on, so, you know, we have reason to go and attack so-and-so. Maybe. So we've got Mars, 2 degrees. Here we go. Where is it? Here we go. Okay, literally. Sabian Symbols book. Okay, Diana Roche. Page 152. Sabian symbol for Leo 2, okay, because we round up. An epidemic of mumps. The keyword is infection. The theme is the opportunity for expansion. The symbol speaks to some of more aspects of the self getting completely out of control, and to the tendency of man to want to escape or avoid facing the reality when life gets unpleasant. And there is no understanding of what needs to be done or what needs to be required to bring about healing or restore health and organic integrity. I want to reiterate, organic integrity. Can you hear that? Okay. The image of an epidemic of mumps is suggesting a situation that affects not only the individual, but group functioning. The emphasis in this reverse symbol is a temporary inability to continue with some present wished for activity and the need to understand while the moment has been restricted in one direction, it has opened up the opportunity for expansion in another. Cue the square to Jupiter in the North Node. Here's a call to realize that there is no reason for everything that there is a reason for everything that happens in life, and the task at hand is to comprehend the higher purpose or interest in being served by the limitation. At its highest, it represents self-expansion and dramatization of some unique aspects of self. That means the constructive contribution to each phase of living. Watch for highlighting inequalities in order to escape experience or avoid responsibility. The accent is on disease and momentum. Things could get out of control and be unstoppable within a particular group. Healing may be needed. The opportunity is your greatest advantage lies into understanding the greater purpose of being served by a difficult drama that is playing out in the open. Be sensitive to the opportunities being revealed. Guard against temptation to downgrade your abilities and to know-how in order to avoid responsibility. Running away from the experience will create greater problems. Stepping stones are contagion, infection, transmission, expansion, momentum, outbreak, increase, surge, eruption, outburst, disease, affliction, disorder, and sickness. Well, I mean, obviously it's a reverse symbol. You know, can it be literal? Can it be figurative? The fact that the sun is trining Pluto makes me feel like there is some connection to air, transportation. Maybe you're hearing that it's pollution, that pollution is the sickness, right? I mean, maybe, I don't know. I'm speculating because astrology can be literal or figurative. But I will tell you that between the fixed square and technically a grand fixed cross, right? Perhaps maybe there is some event that they're suggesting that's taking place is a reason or a means to be able to go, well, now we have to control money, right? Now you can't have physical money. Now we need to have digital money. Now, you know, you may not be able to have enough resources. Whether it's true or not true, it's not up to me to make that decision. It's just me looking at this going like, okay, events are going to play out at the end of May. That's going to have everybody kind of questioning whether or not they have financial security. And if, God forbid, there's another event or something that takes place, the silver lining is all of these placements in Taurus and the North Node in Taurus, which is what can you be resourceful with? What do you have at home? Worst case scenario, you listen to my video and you grab a little bit of extra food, maybe a couple bags of rice, beans, maybe you put some extra food in the freezer, you have some extra dog food or pet food, you make sure that you have some, you know, produce maybe that you're preserving or that you're saving, maybe you plant a garden, right? And you have those things, and it saves you one less trip or few to the grocery store. But it may actually end up being something that keeps some people from feeling like, okay, I'm being told there's some kind of crisis scenario. I don't want to go out. I'm just going to kind of hang tight until things kind of ease up a little bit and you feel like a little bit safer. I'm not a doom and gloom astrologer, but this is something between the Sabian symbols and some of these aspects that are enough for me to be kind of like, I don't know, go back and watch some of the other videos that I've put out. A lot of the stuff that I've told you guys that was going to happen has happened. So be paying attention to what's going on the 23rd, the 24th. Mars will come into a square with the nodes on the 26th. And that is going to be bringing up some combative stuff because Mars is at a 3, so it's communication, words, travel. I wonder if that's going to trigger some travel-related issues, maybe. On the 26th, we're also going to see that there is going to be a sextile between Venus and Uranus. Venus and Uranus. And here comes Mercury getting ready to come into the conjunction with Uranus again. Sun's coming into a square with Saturn. Sun in Gemini, about communication, information, ideas, traveling, moving about, driving, documents. Saturn, which is about limitations. So you're going to have some people being like, okay, do we go where we're supposed to be going? It's a fast-moving transit, and this is not anything compared to the other things happening, but it's all factoring in at the same time. We are going to see the Sun square or oppose Saturn 3 times out of the year. It always happens, so that's not unusual. It's not as unusual as some of the other configurations, but it may have something to do with the aftermath of whatever these conjunctions were. We're going to see the Sun-Saturn square that's going to perfect actually, let's see, when will that be? The 27th, the 28th? So you'll start feeling it on the 27th, and it's going to happen in the afternoon on the 27th. Once again, at a 6 health degree, okay? And the ruler obviously is Mercury, and Mercury is coming into conjunction with Uranus. So it's like, in my mind, and this is just my perspective, I've had this feeling that a lot of what's gone on the last 2 or 3 years was kind of like a dress rehearsal to like see like how much people will comply. And if they are aware, I say they loosely, that there is incoming crisis coming with finances or resources, that if there is something that happens that would buy a little bit more time or control what people can do or say or where they can go before some of this stuff hits, or say there's a war or there's some reason why, you know, people can't be going places, to be careful, it would obviously kind of either create a distraction or it would slow things down from things becoming inflamed. The conjunction between Mercury and Uranus is actually, it looks like it's not going to happen until June. And so this is only really taking you through the month of May. But still, nevertheless, that conjunction is going to be happening at 20 degrees on the 4th of June. That'll be on the full moon in Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter conjunct the North Node, Mercury conjunct Uranus, Mercury rules the Sun, and we've got Venus in opposition to Pluto. So in my opinion, this is buying time, basically trying to kind of pump the brakes and create some situations to either distract or kind of slow things down before some of the inevitable happens in June, when this conjunction happens at a Scorpio degree, where we start to find out the real effects and the shocks of finances. And then we start to see Venus come into an opposition with Pluto square Jupiter. You're going to hear a lot of people talking about ways to be able to save or, you know, protect their money. And Taurus is about material goods. So I think you are going to hear people talk about, you know, precious metals and whether it makes sense to diversify into some of that stuff. I'm just going to keep telling you guys, not a financial advisor. But North Node in Taurus says if you don't have it physically in your hand, you don't possess it. So if you don't physically have the food, if you don't physically have the resources, if you don't physically have the gold, if you don't physically have the money, if the money is sitting in an account, there's no guarantee that it's necessarily safe. Diversifying and kind of spreading some of your investments might be smart. Having some cash on hand, you know, in the off chance that you need it throughout this period is smart. And I also feel like this is also going to be about the exchanges. So as I'm filming this, we haven't even had the eclipse yet. So if you're watching this the later part of May, let me know what happened, how accurate some of this stuff was. But if you leave your money on exchanges, if you don't have things set up, this is the month to really pay attention, that you need to make sure you have your buy and sell orders in, all of your limit orders in, all that stuff. And please do not leave money in limbo on exchanges, or especially crypto exchanges. Because what's going to happen is this is when things are going to start going buck wild. And then Venus will come into this opposition with Pluto once again in June. So we'll be talking about this more, okay? But there's going to be similar themes, because Venus is about money, that will square Jupiter and Pluto. I think we're going to hear more about the debt ceiling. I think we're going to hear about whether or not the United States is going to go into default with some of their loans. And I think we're also going to see things kind of shift in regards to what people are doing with some of their resources. As a reminder, you know, this is really unusual astrology. Do go and listen to your rising sign horoscope if you have the time, or your sun sign horoscope. That can be helpful. I am taking clients. I'm booking sessions in now July and August. So I'm a very busy lady. When the world's on fire, I'm very, very busy. There's only one of me. And I made the commitment the last year and a half to almost cut my schedule in half from seeing clients, because I felt like I'm helping people, but working in a room, just talking with people 4 or 5 days a week, it's helping, but it's not helping as much as I can help creating this content. So that's the sacrifice that I've made. It's been worth it. It's been amazing to have the feedback and also start teaching again and teaching other people so they can help other people. But it's possible because you guys support my channel. So it's not often that I say, hey, donate to my channel or join my memberships and help me continue to keep doing this. But I can do this because of that support. So if you guys like my content, at the very least, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment below. Let me know how you're feeling with this. Even if you don't agree, that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm not gonna be comment police. I do read everybody's comment. I can't always get back to you, but I appreciate your guys' feedback, and I love hearing your guys' perspectives. I also want to tell you guys that some of the decisions that you make with some of these squares to Pluto and the nodes will affect the trajectory of your life moving forward. So the nodes are really sensitive points, guys. This deals with karma. This deals with where the soul grows. So when you're in situations where people are lashing out, getting angry, getting mad, reacting, getting kind of crazy or kind of violent, you want to lean more into the North Node in Taurus, which is still calm, collected, knowledgeable, really focusing on what you can be building. Don't get lost with all the conflict in the world this month. Take a breath. And also, it's not the time to be jumping into other people's stuff. If you're seeing an altercation, right? If you're seeing something going on, if there's something that is violent or somebody's getting hurt or it's illegal, contact who you need to contact to get involved. But be very careful with getting intertwined with altercations this month. Because a lot of people are going to be very reactionary when some of this stuff goes down, and whether it's people getting weird about possessions and money or food, or this is people getting very angry and reactionary because of some of the events or some of the news that's coming out. You don't want to be involved in that. So please just look around, be aware of your surroundings, try to stay optimistic, hold space for this shift, because I think that Taurus is just teaching all of us that we got to stay in the body, because a lot of the triggers that are going to come up this month are to get you to be falling for the fear tactics. If you need a reading, like I said, join me on Fridays. I'm happy to read for you. We do them all by donation. So it can be a helpful way if you guys can't wait for a reading to get in with me and get a mini reading. I offer reports too. So those of you guys who can't wait, usually within a week, I can send an audio report out to you. That's on my website. Go to my website at beyondtheveiledtarot.com. You guys can check out my services. I have all kinds of stuff there. I just got done creating the content schedule for the month. So I have lots of stuff we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about all of the transits that I just discussed, but I'm going to start putting something together for the Venus retrograde. I'll do like Venus through the 12 signs in Cancer, Mars through the 12 signs. We'll take a look at some of these transits more in depth, how they may play out. I'm putting together a webinar for the Venus retrograde, so I'll do a video on that, but I'm probably going to try to put a webinar out sometime maybe June or July, so I'll let you guys know about the tickets for that, because my events or my webinars are usually live and I do it through a private link. So if you have an interest in that, let me know below. Otherwise, I will be back on Tuesday. We're gonna have more content coming out, and just hang tight throughout some of these eclipse energies and these retrogrades. Know that a lot of stuff's changing right now. A lot of things are closing out this week. So when in doubt, just try to keep the faith, and I will see all of you guys back here on Tuesday, reporting more on some of this cosmic craziness. Thank you guys for your support. I really appreciate it. I'm wishing you all a happy month ahead for May, and I will see all of you very soon. Take care.